Mary Pickford was born Gladys Marie Smith in April of 1892 in Ontario, Canada. America's sweetheart was born in Ontario,
I know,
Canada.
already. Like, we can't, America's sweethearts are too abrasive and unappealing. We got to import a Canadian to be the...
We had America's sweetheart picked, but she had a Confederate flag tattoo. So we had to go with Canada, who doesn't know what that is. As one biography puts it, talking about Mary Pickford's childhood is hard because she really didn't have one. I feel like that's a little bit of an exaggeration.
Because her whole life was her childhood? Because she was America's sweetheart.
Because she was America's sweetheart. She kind of had a childhood. She had a lot of happy memories. You know, in her autobiography, she remembers that she would like buy a single rose and eat the petals, believing the beauty and the color and the perfume would somehow get she would ingest the beauty of a rose if she ate it. She remembers
That's really sad. That's like one of the saddest details of anybody's life I've ever heard.
Oh yeah. She remembers riding her bike around the street in her street in Toronto, and one of her best memories is getting a bike for her birthday. She was a little emotionally sensitive girl born into a really poor family. That's really her start. Over the next 4 years, the Smiths had 2 more kids, Charlotte, who they called Lottie, and John Charles, who everyone called him Jack. It's really confusing because their mother, her name is Charlotte as well. So they nicknamed their daughter Lottie. Just if you don't want to get confused and name it something else.
Yeah,
but
she has to be a living tribute to her mother.
There needs to be one Charlotte in the family if the taxman comes. So if something happens to me, there needs to be a Charlotte.
She was born as a pyramid scheme.
John.
It's a bouncing baby pyramid scheme.
Their dad's name was John, and they named the son John. So they're like, your nickname is Jack. Just give them different. Okay. Her dad could never really hold a job because he was an alcoholic, which makes holding a job other than being a professional alcoholic really hard. This alcoholism was an immediate issue as the family was dirt poor, but also not only were they dirt poor, his alcoholism had like lasting effects on the kids. From her biography, I found
that
this
doesn't sound like the alcoholism I know.
No. Kids for sure forget it. From her biography, I found this passage regarding the Smith and Pickford kids. The children of alcoholics live in a quagmire of emotions, combining love and fear of the ailing parent with an aching need for his approval. They may over-empathize towards those they perceive as the drunkard victims, and their wish to replace the drunken parent by bearing his responsibilities turns them into mini adults and perfectionists. Sadly, their anxiety and stress is capped by a horror of causing pain to other people. As Mary grew, she displayed these empathetic traits with textbook precision. Yikes.
I can't think of a better topic for us to have picked for our 100th episode. What a fun, light time, our 100th celebration. There's like balloons and fireworks behind me and a bunch of puppies running around.
They are pouring champagne and they pour it from the cup back into the glass.
Yeah, they somehow put the cork back in.
Usually this is impossible, but the yikes of this moment made me do it. I read that passage and I was like, huh. None of that applies to me.
Your nose started bleeding.
That's not about me at all. So after little Jack was born, their father pretty much abandoned the family. And after
you were America's sweetheart too for a while, weren't you?
I was America's sweet.
I had America's first sweetheart syndrome, yes.
It was an implant. America's first sweetheart implant.
My heart failed and they had to transplant a heart from a Sour Patch Kid. And yes, that was me. You might remember. It's 100 episodes. I'm ready to admit that.
So after little Jack was born, their father abandoned the family and after about a year and a half died from a cerebral hemorrhage after an accident at work on a steamship when he banged his head really hard against a pulley.
Okay, this is my worst nightmare. Well, this is page 1, my worst nightmare. Because that's like, I don't think he was on a steamship, but I think that's what happened.
You don't think you're going to get an accident on a steamship?
Not me. Not with these sea legs.
I was chasing this goat that had my candy on the Queen Mary and I banged my head real hard.
But that's what happened to Bob Saget, what they think happened to Bob Saget.
He was on a steamship?
He was Mark Twain.
When you win the Mark Twain Award, you become Mark Twain for a year.
They think that he like hit his head on something and like got a concussion or something and he went to sleep.
Concussions and aneurysms.
Oh, yes.
Man.
I've had a concussion.
Have you had a concussion?
I had a minor concussion when I was younger and I went blind in my left eye for like 20 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty scary.
I love knowing you had brain damage and to think that...
Oh, I get it.
I've been letting you abuse me for so long. It was just brain damage that was wrong with you. You're not arrogant. You don't have a problem with people. You banged your head. So their dad died. Gladys was particularly grief-stricken with her dad's death, and their mother completely withdrew into isolation until one day her son Jack got real sick and she had to like snap out of it. So now the family that was financially limping was now officially crawling. They like had no money. So she was a seamstress. Now she had to really kick into gear. They started making money any way they could, and one of those ways was renting rooms in their home to boarders. One of the first boarders they had in their home after a string of single women was a married couple with the last name Murphy. Husband Murphy was a stage manager for a theatrical stock company, a troupe called the Cumming Stock Company, who performed at Toronto's Princess Theatre. Very apt. He offered to cast both the girls, Gladys and Lottie, in a play he was managing. Their mom was a little hesitant, but when Murphy offered her to come down and meet the cat, because at the time, it's the late 1890s, acting was like, what, so you're a prostitute? Like, people pay you money and you act as like you're the governor? It was really looked down upon. It was like similar enough to like a traveling circus where a mom would be like, I better check this out first. So she went down and checked it out, and she felt this group of ragtag actors were pretty decent, and the girls would be earning $8 a week, which was like desperately needed in their house. So
hey, you're telling me. Sign up for our Patreon
and put us in a play, whatever play you want.
If you want us to be in some sort of late 1800s strip show or whatever, we'll do it for $8 a month.
So she sent her children, in particular Gladys, out to make money, and she also went with them, and she like played organs for certain shows. Gladys Smith's theatrical debut was in a play called The Silver King. The year was 1900, the turn of the century, literal turn of the century, and little Gladys was 8 years old. She had one line in her play, in her very first play, Silver King, 1900. She was 8 years old. She had one line and would later come onto stage to perform as a boy playing with toys. So she already in her first role, she's already playing two parts. Her role was as a fatherless child, which maybe was a little too close to home for any other little girl, but this was not just any little girl. The first movie star of Hollywood, which was not even a thing yet, channeled her raw emotions and dropped the first hint to the troupe that she had a star quality. That didn't matter at the time, though, because their 8-year-old felt the burden of responsibility to her family and was happy to be helping to support them. Like, an 8-year-old girl got $8, just like, my family gets to live for another week. Like, that's how like Mary Pickford was as a little girl. In their house, education was a luxury, so over the span of 2 years, Gladys got about 6 months of school in. So the stage performing was the best shot she had at any kind of education, any kind of a future was on that stage. Gladys and Lottie's appearances had gone over so well, they were now invited to be part of this acting troupe, so they would be traveling with them, with their mom and Jack. Suddenly, little 8-year-old Gladys Smith is now a working actor. By 1905, she was making $25 a week performing with this troupe. She kept acting at small productions and traveling, and as her talents and stage presence grew, she and her two siblings got small parts. I heard like off-Broadway. I also heard that she did some stuff on Broadway, which was a huge step up from traveling with the low-end acting group, because now she could put her family up in a hotel, and like they like felt stable for a little bit. If she was like performing on Broadway or even like in a stable theater, like, oh wow, this is what having a home is like. That's pretty nice.
This is still Toronto Broadway.
Yeah, she's still in Canada. Yeah.
Broadway went that far?
You know, actually, I think they might have been in the States at this point. While touring, the Smiths made friends with another traveling acting family in a very similar situation. The two daughters of his other family were Dorothy and Lillian Gish, two future Hollywood stars of the silent era. And the Gish sisters and the Smith siblings became lifelong friends. If you've seen Night of the Hunter with Robert Mitchum, the old woman he faces off with at the end is Lillian Gish, which is how I know her, because I don't. So their lives improved exponentially when they performed for these bigger shows. In particular, they did a play called Edmund Burke, and it was like they all went legit. As well as the audiences being better and making Gladys work harder at her craft, this allowed the family, like I was saying, some stability, and that really mattered to Gladys. When that show closed, the family went back to Toronto, but Gladys continued with the troupe alone. So her family went back to Toronto, and she's what, like 9 at this point, and she's already like, all right.
Well, that's a Canadian adult.
The way that girls mature faster than boys is the way that Canada matures faster than America.
Canada, the older sister. the younger sister that acts like the older sister to America.
But having a taste for a better life as an actor was addictive. And in 1907, at the age of 15, she was more determined than ever to go legit. She set her sights on the biggest producer at the time, David Belasco, the Bishop of Broadway. On top of being
no idea who that is.
I think I know and I don't know. Like, it's weird. Like, is the Belasco Theater named after him?
That makes sense.
If it's named after him.
Is Bishop, California named after him?
Are the chess pieces named after him?
Is chess a metaphor for show business?
On top of being the best producer, in her eyes, the best producer, he cultivated the talents of actors like Blanche Bates and Leslie Carter, who I don't know, and made them into stars. So Gladys, her clear, well thought out plan was to hang out in his office and ask him for a role. Easy peasy. No big deal if she can get into the doors of the building, which she could not. And she tried every day for most of the summer of 1907 trying to meet David Belasco, who was unmeetable, but she wanted it. She wanted this thing. She had her mindset. This was her plan, and she was sticking to it, and finally got a little wiser and contacted Blanche Bates, who Belasco made into a star. And she had worked with Gladys before and asked if she could use her name as a referral and an introduction to vouch for her. And when Blanche gave her blessings, it was like this weird adrenaline kick she needed to storm into his office, demanding a meeting with him, screaming his name so loud that Belasco like Stella,
like people restraining this curly-haired Canadian 15-year-old.
Belasco's assistant eventually came down just to see where the fire was and found it. And she must have been so worked up, and he must have been so charmed that his assistant was like, fine, let's meet David Belasco. When she gets in front of him, she says, I'm the father of my family and I need to earn money. And when he asked her, why him? She said, my mother always told me to aim high or not at all. And those were like those two things together clinched it. He cast
her mom's Yoda. Okay, that explains the curls.
Star Wars universe is so big. It's so big.
It's so big it stretches to Canada.
You thought I went as far as Northern California? You're dumb.
Didn't you recognize Watto's accent?
He's
from
Ottawa.
Watto.
So she clinched it. She like really impressed him, and he was like, all right, well, fine. I've made other women, and I can make you too. He cast her in a small role that earned a low salary, so back to the bottom, but it was the bottom of the Belasco world, and she took it. But he required from her a big change. Gladys Milbourne Smith had been her credited acting name on stage, but Belasco thought it sounded a little too self-important. At his suggestion, Gladys Smith changes her name to Mary Pickford, pulling from her Christian middle name Marie and her grandfather's name John Pickford Hennessy. And
I thought it was going to be like, and her favorite activity, cherry picking.
At the Ford plant.
Yeah, cherry picking racist comments from Henry Ford's transcripts.
I like this one, but not this one. And the change was so popular that her whole family changed their names. Charlotte, Lottie, and Jack all took on the name Pickford.
That's weird. Was he like, I didn't mean this?
Yeah, I bet it was witness protection. Like acting in America when you're Canadian is like, everyone's got to change their name too.
If the Prime Minister finds out about this, oh boy. Ooh.
And so now they are the traveling Pickfords. Through her run, just like the Beverly Hillbillies, she was cast in a play called The Warrens of Virginia, and she toured North America and Canada. And the journalists writing about the production noted the hometown girl that ascended to the heights of the Belasco production. Her acting chops were top notch because she's been acting since she was like 8 years old. So she's doing really good, and she's getting people kind of talking about her. But in 1909, when the play wrapped, she was suddenly out of a job. Her mother suggested she try finding work at these little novelty Flickr studios making like 8-minute motion pictures.
Her mom was fine with that. Go work at the Flickr studio.
Yeah, the Flickr.
Act on Broadway. Ooh.
What? Why would you ever do that?
What are you from? Calgary?
But seriously, if you could make some money being a ghost on film, that would be great. If you didn't catch it, novelty Flickr studios making 8-minute motion pictures. That was like filmmaking in its true infancy. Like the seed of it was like year 2 of
like
filmmaking.
It was her like brushing her hair, and that won an Oscar.
Exactly.
Before Oscars even existed.
It was a real Oscar. You want him.
Yeah, you got
He worked for
they
you.
had so many people named Oscar back then, and they just gave him out like candy.
Mary thought that this was an awful idea. She was a true actress working on the stage for David Belasco. Why would I jump on TikTok? I have integrity. Why would I start TikTok? Flicktalk. Flickflock.
100
episodes just to sync up for that one time.
Good night, everybody.
But she was scared of saying no to her mom. She was scared of having no money for the family. So she went over to ask for work at the American Mutoscope Company a year before it became Biograph Studios.
What is she, from Montreal? I'm slowly going to run out of Canadian cities.
What is she, from Nova Scotia? That you could use that one too.
Don't steal it.
And she went up to the studio that eventually became Biograph and met up with a principal director there, D.W. Griffith, who was nobody at the time.
Okay, he's going to come up in my thing, and that was the one question I could not answer. I was like, I get how these other people relate to Mary Pickford. Why does she know D.W. Griffith?
These two were like year one, like you're a nobody, I'm a nobody. Let's work together.
Weird.
At the time, that name, like I said,
she was in Birth of a Nation, right?
She's everywhere. She's like Eddie Jackson. She's like Eddie Murphy in Birth of a Nation. She plays everybody.
The only outrage about it at the time was that those hoods covered her curly hair. Everything else was fine to everybody.
Working for this novelty picture studio would earn her $5 a week with a minimum 3-day work week, which was insulting. She was a Belasco girl, for Christ's sake. She'd been on Broadway.
What am I from? Vancouver?
Hold on, Daniel's got to Google something unrelated to this bit that he's running.
Don't mind me.
I'm watching pornographies right now, so don't mind me.
Don't mind me. I'm watching Birth of a Nation. It's okay.
Charmed, just like Belasco and Belasco's assistant, Griffith agreed to her demand. She accepted $10 a week. But a strange thing happened. Mary Pickford fell in love with the movies and having her image and presence captured on film. She came to see it as a
How unvain.
She came to see it as a true art form and flourished working with D.W. Griffith, who was coming into his own as an artist who would make Birth of a Nation. So she started appearing in film.
I gotta Google something.
Just real quick. So she started appearing in his films with Biograph and then started appearing in the films of the rival studio Independent Moving Picture Company, both of which were in violation of Thomas Edison's patent.
Who wasn't?
If you don't know, Independent Moving
We don't have to go through that a whole.
No, let me repeat it. Let me repeat the 2 pages I wrote last month.
To really understand this, we got to give the history of Eddie Mannix.
So where does this guy come from? Okay, Thomas Edison is making cameras in New Jersey.
Okay, so humans leave Africa.
I love when we meet each other, you sugar high and me a little bit buzzed, and we meet right in the middle. That's perfect.
It's like in Harry Potter when like they both shoot spells at each other. Like there's a green spell and a red spell, and they both just hit each other.
Independent Moving Picture Company, eventually, it's run by Carl Laemmle, who we talked about last episode, eventually becomes Universal Pictures. But right now, it's called IMP. So in 1909, Pickford was seen in 51 of Griffith's films. Her very first film was in Griffith's Her First Biscuits.
I told you, movies were just like...
They were filming B-roll.
Manti Shrew. Give him my Oscar.
The first 15 years of filmmaking was stock footage.
Yeah.
I'm like, Girly, it's Banana. Okay, go on. I don't know. Girly Banana's pretty good, but I don't think it's going to win the Oscar this year.
My favorite photographer from back then was Getty Images.
He just captured a feeling, a mood. She was 17 at the time and playing the part of a 10-year-old, which is something that's just... I mean, happy to see that things in Hollywood are exactly the same. On the set of this movie, she meets another...
Melrose Place.
Yeah, I'm in high school.
I'm in high school, and watch me tie my shoe. Oscar, get over there.
On the set of this movie, she meets another actor working for the studio, Owen Moore. More on that later. Later that year, she gets her first starring role as Giannina in The Violin Maker of Cremonia. In a review with the New York Dramatic Mirror, Mary is singled out with this quote: "This delicious little comedy introduced again an ingenue whose work in Biograph Pictures is attracting attention." And here's the thing about Biograph Studios, and I think a lot of the studios at the time, they didn't credit their actors because if they credit their actors, they would want more money.
Yes.
They credited the director, but because they wanted, like, oh, that's our troupe, the Biograph troupe. They so
these are our props.
Yeah, you as an actor represent your troupe, not yourself. But the actors were clearly stars. They were getting singled out because film audiences want to talk about their favorite things, and because they didn't know her name, Mary Pickford was becoming famous as the Biograph Girl. Everybody was talking about the Biograph Girl. She shared this title with another big actress at the time with a great name, Florence Lawrence. It sounds like when they pick on you. Florence Lawrence is here. Pickford was also called the girl with the golden curls and blondie locks.
All right.
One's better than the other for sure.
Goldilocks not exist that back? Was gold so scarce?
Gold and blonde were different back then.
Speaking of Debbie Harry.
If she walked into the Ramones wherever they were squatting was like, this mattress on the floor is too cold. This mattress on the floor is too hot.
This heroin is too...
This piss-covered mattress on the floor is too piss-covered. So, Blondie Lux, the girl with the golden curls, the Biograph Girl. This is important because it meant that people were talking about it. Journalists and regular moviegoers alike were all talking about this girl that they kept seeing. She struck everyone. She often played young, innocent characters, and she played them incredibly naturally. There were a lot of things that she did as an actress that she was doing, like fixing a piece of clothing during a scene or casually caressing another character. There was a lot of stuff that she was doing that other actors weren't doing. They were like kind of hamming it up, and because it was silent, they were like overexpressing. She went minute. She went specific.
If I caress this person's shoulder, how will the people in the back row see it?
Exactly.
I better push them and bulge my eyes out as I do so they know I did it.
I'm not going to take a regular swing at you. I'm going to move my arm entirely on the other side of the camera.
I've got to wind
it up. She played children, married women, servants, princesses, waifs, and to all her roles, she brought a sense of realism and was one of the first on-screen performers to stamp her presence onto every role that she took. She was also such a pro actress at the time that sometimes she directed her own scenes, and she said that if she didn't agree with the director on something, she would refuse to perform it. So she was already like...
I can tell you this is going to cause trouble in her life later on.
I can't see how that's possible.
No. A combative woman in Hollywood? No.
In the first half of the 20th century? No. In any part of the 20th century? No. How would that? So, in January of 1910, Biograph Studios decides to innocently and with no ulterior motives, just randomly, for no big reason, move out west to, I don't know, Southern California. Oh, did Do you say that no one in California has heard of Edison's patent on movie making? How very
Here we go. You just can't
odd.
stop talking
That's
about Thomas
very
Edison every episode.
odd. That's weird because we were just going to go anyway. We were just going to go to Southern California anyways.
Greg, you know that this is a Tesla podcast. We don't talk about Thomas Edison.
They kept saying like, oh, the weather on the East Coast is not great right now, so we're just going to go to the West Coast and film. But I'm like, I know what you really want. So they very innocently headed to Los Angeles. Along with Mary Pickford and her 14-year-old brother Jack were 40 other Biograph cast and crew members, including Max Sennett, who would later become that era's king of comedy, creating the Keystone Cops. When they got here in 1910, Los Angeles...
Still not sure where that name came from exactly.
It's going to make me watch some comedies that I have to sit down and pay attention to, and I'm like, oh, can't you be like a TikTok? Can you be like... I mean...
Can you be a flick flock?
Yeah, can you flick flock? Can you be a flick flock? In 1910, Los Angeles was not much to look at. Apparently, they made a little shanty town at Grandin, Washington, which sounds like Schuetz Park. I also read that they set up in a Chinese laundromat, like a little studio. Max Sennett apparently blew his...
Is it Anime Wong's place?
You know what? Part of me was like, I wonder if it's a famous one. There were famous laundromats. Was it a famous one? Max Sennett apparently blew his wad renting a room at the Alexandria just to get a full bath. And not too long into our city, it seems they fell in love with what keeps being referred. They keep like 3 different articles were like, they fell in love with the desert. Like, it's not a desert. It's semi-arid. And they use a variety.
It's chaparral. Okay. Does a desert have dead brush like this?
Look at that river. That's a trickle of... Did someone spill a cup? Did someone knock a cup over? No, it's a river.
Someone on top of the San Gabriel Mountain, their pool's leaking.
You just wait for 2 more years and you'll see the biggest flood of your life. And, of course, they're here. They discover the discoverable thing. We have a variety of locations here and you can film any terrain and have it be the movie you're making. Mm-hmm. They discover... This is the crew that discovers it. The Unchanging Sea.
The Lewis and Clark of Hollywood.
The Lewis and Clark of filmmaking.
Where's their dollar coin?
Who's their Sacagawea? Mary Pickford?
Yeah. Someone that D.W. Griffith put in some offensive makeup?
The Unchanging Sea, which is a film, was shot on the Santa Monica Beach in Never Again. You can see Mary Pickford in a rowboat on Venice Canal. A Rich Revenge used the oil rigs of Edendale, which I didn't know Edendale had oil rigs. And Ramona uses shots of the Santa Monica mountains and canyons. The vast underpopulated San Fernando Valley provided rolling hills for several of their movies. But Mary's time here was purely professional. She worked 6 days a week, and when D.W. Griffith ran short of ideas, he turned to his actor. So Mary sold him 3 story premises. So her talents
got
are
this idea.
expanding.
Woman brushes teeth, followed by the sequel, Woman
Nobody
flosses.
will watch it. It said that in 1912, the film Friends, Mary Pickford was the subject of the first cinematic close-up shot, and we're not going to pay attention to the name of the title.
The one with the close-up shot,
the one where she has to move a couch upstairs.
The title card keeps coming up pivot like every 4 seconds. It was the funniest thing to hit the flick flocks.
They had a chimp in a couple episodes of Mary Pickford.
They had to invent cool. widescreen so that they could fit Chenandler Bong on a title card. Seeing movies was impressive enough, so it was Visible Cat that they sang about.
Visibly stinky cat. Mary Pickford would not stay with Biograph for long.
How are we seeing you? Go on.
Mary Pickford would not stay with Biograph for long. She ended up leaving the studio for their rival, Carl Laemmle's independent moving picture company of America, or IMP. She was making $175 a week with them, which was huge. Also around this time, she
was? Golly.
Wow. I can buy 2 houses for that.
Yeah, man, Shirley Temple. I could be drinking.
I'll ruin my entire family drinking Shirley Temples. Around this time, she borrows a long, elegant-ish dress from the costume department and marries fellow actor from our very first movie, Owen Moore. And she does it kind of secretly because her mom doesn't like him.
Her mom was a big part of her life, wasn't it?
Like she was her business manager.
Right. Quote unquote business manager. It's like a Britney Spears situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it is like a Britney Spears. Or any child actor is like, we're going to make sure you do all the right moves, but you're also paying me.
Yeah.
And I'm your parent. The money you get, I get a chunk of it.
I'm first and foremost your manager. Second, your mother.
What's so weird is when you see like right now, I love Kieran Culkin. I think he's a great actor. I liked him for like a really long time. It's so funny that like people talk about Macaulay Culkin like this sad childhood, abused by his parents, and Kieran Culkin doesn't. He's like, yeah, I kind of just hung out in the back and took whatever small roles, and I'm fine. Or is he? I have no idea.
I don't know. Has he recovered from being squished by that chair in Home Alone?
Well, he peed in the bed so much that the squish of the chair really softened because he peed because he drank Coca-Cola. I love Kieran Culkin. Anyways, getting married and working for IMP sends Pickford back back to New Jersey. So she leaves California. It only lasts like a year because for some reason they end up moving operations to Cuba. So she goes with them, but then she comes back, breaks her contract with Imps, and then joins Majestic Company. They're making $225 a week. So she does some films there and with Selig Studio, but all the movies sucked. So she ends up going back to Biograph. When she returns, her old pals, the Gish sisters, find Mary Pickford and they're like, can you help us? So she gets them signed for Biograph and ends up making movies with D.W. Griffith too. This point in her life is the beginning of the Gish sisters becoming popular. Pickford split her time between working at the studios and returning to the stage for Belasco's production of A Good Little Devil, and she was getting great reviews and her fan base was like swelling up. The year was 1913. And Adolf Zucker of the famous Players Lasky Company was planning to adapt the production for film, and they tapped Mary Pickford to reprise her role that she played on stage. It wouldn't come out for a year, but in the meantime, Zucker signed Mary Pickford to the famous Players for $500 a week, which is $13,000 in 2022. And with that, the door to movie stardom opened up. Around this time, she officially moves to Los Angeles, but because her later home was such a big deal, I can't figure out where.
Don't talk about
Because if you talk about if you type Mary Pickford home or Mary Pickford Los Angeles, it only comes up with her future home. Must have been easy for you to do research, huh, pal?
Where did Thomas Jefferson live before Monticello? Who cares? Or whoever lived at Monticello. Who cares?
The Eagle's Nest. I kind of remember parts of history, and I mixed them up.
Who lived in the Eagle's Nest before Hitler? Who cares?
Albert Einstein. In 1913, she was cast in The Bishop's Carriage, which was a huge success for Zucker, and the critics and regular nobodies loved it. She does a few more films within the year for her famous Players Lasky, but in 1914, at the age of 22, Mary Pickford, who had been working hard since she was 8 years old, was about to get her big break in Tess of the Storm Country, which was filmed in the Santa Monica Mountains and has one of the worst titles that I've ever had to have. Mary would play Tess, a poor but heroic woman who makes the decision to care for a baby born to a suicidal unwed mother. It was a sympathetic part that had some comedic elements to it, and it was the absolute perfect role for Mary Pickford at the time. And from what I read after this, it was Beatlemania. Like she had Beatlemania. She had Pickford mania. She gained a whole new fan base because of this movie, and her old fans who still thought of her as the Biograph Girl were rabid with adoration.
Did people sell curly wigs?
They sold curly wigs. Ed Sullivan wore a curly wig. Little girls tore up seats. This role truly sets Mary Pickford apart from her contemporaries. And this is where she was marketed as America's foremost film actress, Mary Pickford. That's what people were calling her, like her official title. But a new phrase was coined to describe her, and it was the first time this phrase was ever used, and it was used specifically for Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart.
Really?
Yeah.
So that was who's America's sweetheart today? Kieran Culkin?
It's Kieran Culkin. It was a debate between him and Michael Cera, but then Secession came out. That moniker was given to her by theater owner David Grauman, who's the father of Sid Grauman.
This is how far back we're going in Hollywood, that we're talking about the dad of the oldest man in Hollywood.
The man who literally put
Methuselah Grauman?
Cain and Abel Grauman?
Oh boy. The Theater of Eden was such a nice place before what Cain did to Abel.
Am I my brother's theater?
Don't eat from the snack bar.
You didn't eat the egg of Forbidden Knowledge, did you?
The egg.
I didn't know. You didn't go to the Apple Store of Forbidden Knowledge, did you? I didn't know I was supposed to go in there.
Silence your apples of knowledge.
After the success of Tess of the Storm Country, with her fame at its most potent, she was making $1,000 a week during production, which was $30,000 in today's money, making her the highest paid actress at that time. At this point, she really...
I'm just having a sad realization of not even counting for inflation. If we're just taking those numbers, she's making way more money than I'm making today.
That amount she's making $1,000 a week is more than I'm making in 2022 a week. Have you tried being Mary Pickford though?
I mean, I did cut my hair, so I guess I've lost my appeal to America.
You'll find out what happened to her when she cuts her hair later. At this point, she could really negotiate any rate that she wanted, and it would be cleared because the whole movie watching world wanted Mary Pickford. I'm going to watch something. Is Mary Pickford in it? Yeah, I'm probably going to watch that. But the
Who's Harpo Marx?
He had beautiful curls. He had beautiful golden curls. By the next year, she's dubbed the queen of the movies, and she keeps starring in movies. And she's a star of movies now. Rags, Stella Maris, Daddy Longlegs, Cinderella, the one with James Corden, and Madame Butterfly. In The Girl of Yesterday, Mary Pickford's character is kidnapped and taken away by airplane, which was filmed in Griffith Park.
Wait, what? Taken away by airplane?
In the film The Girl of Yesterday, Mary Pickford's character is kidnapped and taken away by an airplane.
By an airplane.
An airplane.
Okay. I thought you meant the 70s farce airplane.
Mary, you can't be serious. I am serious, and don't call me Mary. Did I do that right? I read somewhere.
Does your father have a drinking problem? Yes. Yes, actually. Don't bring it up.
Yes, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Anyways, the movie she made where she got in a plane. I read somewhere that
Mary's on a plane.
Mary's on a plane. I read somewhere that she was the first actress to be filmed in an airplane. Although people think it most likely goes to Mabel Normand. I didn't double check that, but even if that's true,
I always assumed it was Mabel Normand.
Even if that's true, people are like, yeah, but we like Mary Pickford more. Let's give it to her.
But this was the first time we liked watching it.
Audiences show up for Mary for every single film that she's in. A journalist described Mary as the woman who was known to more people and loved by more people than any other woman that has ever been in history. By the way, the journalist that is quoted there, Adela Rogers St. John, who was mentioned in the last episode, who Clark Gable might have impregnated. Ooh. I called her Rogers St. John, not knowing that by the time I was reading that.
Yeah, I remember you were telling me.
And you're like,
yeah, I believe Junior or Mr. Mom might have been bandied about.
Anyways, Adela Rogers St. John is her full name. Thank you for your patience and understanding in this time of need.
As with all episodes, as we've been doing for 100 months, we leave one critical piece of information out of every episode that you find out in the next
first name. Okay, so now at the end of 1950, Mary and her husband Owen Moore attend a party in New York where she meets Douglas Fairbanks, who's also married.
Okay.
That's weird. And the two become very friendly. That's odd. Pickford bangs out 20 successful movies for Zucker. She's able to renegotiate her salary, and he agrees to $10,000 a week during production, which I didn't even calculate, but I'm sure it's $300,000. But now she could choose. Now part of the stipulations is she could choose her own projects and her own writers and directors and who she wants to work with. These would be released under the name Artcraft, which was a division of famous players Lasky, which eventually becomes Paramount. That plants a seed for her, and later that year, 1916, she opens up her own production company, Mary Pickford Film Corporation, making her the first female film star to own her own film company. Mary Pickford is the first movie star to reach that level of fame, the first businesswoman in the film industry, and the first woman to earn $500,000 as a salary in the film industry, which she negotiated herself. Like a titan of the industry by 1915. But all was not...
And all the while being yelled at by her mom.
All the while playing a 5-year-old. But all was not well with Mary Pickford's personal life, as well as both her actor siblings being alcohol and drug abusers. So was her husband, Owen Moore. Right. Remember the passage earlier about the children of alcoholics and how the pattern of their lives follows a certain path. Her marriage...
Through 2 marriages.
One of the first things she said about the guy she married was like, he reminds me of my dad. Not a good thing. Her marriage, which was done against her mom's best interest, was tumultuous at best. Owen Moore was a lousy, angry drunk, and Mary tried over and over in vain to make it work. Mary continued putting 100% of her attention on her career, maybe to compensate for how dead her relationship was, or maybe to reach a level of success that would fix everything. Either way, not working. At the onset of World War I...
Wait a minute, you're saying success and fame won't fix everything?
It's weird. It's almost like you're saying $500,000 a week during production is not enough to fix everything. Let's try a little bit more money.
Hang on. In other words, are you trying to say that more money means more problems?
I simply cannot fathom. I have 99 problems, and my alcoholic husband
is 99 of them.
99 of them. At the onset of World War I, that's the mustard gas trench rat one, she kicked into patriot mode, going on the road to sell war bonds. In tow was her business manager and mother, Charlotte, and the pals in the industry. There's Charlie Chaplin. And, Douglas Fairbanks, that's weird. Okay, well, my male best friend who's straight and I'm straight. We'll just go on a road trip together in San Francisco.
We're being chaperoned by the little tramp. What could happen?
Yeah, and sure, we have to drive by a bunch of high schools whenever he's here. In San Francisco alone, she managed... No comment.
I was going to go something like he's pushing the car really fast and his legs are flailing. You took it too far, Greg.
You got realistic, which hurt me. In San Francisco alone, she managed to sell $2 million in war bonds just by herself, and it's claimed that she's responsible alone for selling $40 million in war bonds just by herself. Just little Mary Pickford. So all the soldiers had a little picture of, like, not all of them, but a lot of soldiers carried a picture of Mary Pickford to war with them in like a little locket.
So you're saying that the destruction of Europe and all the mass casualties from World War I are because of Mary Pickford?
That's a stretch, but it's not inaccurate.
Every bullet that went into a German person was personally kissed by Mary Pickford.
And what happened after World War I? What did it lead to? Oh, World War II. The Nazi Party rose up in World War II.
And who helped Mary Pickford get very popular? D.W. Griffith. He ruined 2 continents. So they were wearing pins of Mary. That's
like in lockets. It was like not like
so
mandated, but like
did you know what?
Yeah.
Oh, here's your chocolate bar.
Your government issue photo of Mary Pickford. Go ahead and cut her face out in a heart shape and put it in a locket. And when she got back, she got the Spanish flu of 1918, and it wasn't great. But also important around this time, maybe before, but definitely during this trip, Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks started having an affair. Both were unhappily married.
When you're in Paris, when you're liberating Paris,
when you're in a trench in Paris, pretending that you're holding a gun, but it's actually just some op, and everyone's laughing at you because you're Charlie Chaplin, and you're asking where the high school's at.
And while everyone, you're disgusting.
Oh, I'm disgusting.
Yeah.
Both, like I said, both were unhappily married, and this affair was, for Mary anyways, what she really wanted from a relationship. Fairbanks was everything that Owen Moore wasn't. He was
like Douglas of Fairbanks.
Pretty good. He was everything that her husband wasn't. He was dashing and sober. He was full of energy and optimism and was as ambitious as Mary.
So he was sober at the time?
Yeah.
Or he was just sober around her?
He probably didn't drink to the point of being a maniac.
He wasn't Douglas Fairbanks.
He probably was like debonair drunk, like, I'm a little tipsy. Like he was Nick Charles. He's just like, everyone's having a good time and I'm shaking a foxtrot out of a martini glass. He probably wasn't like, I ripped the floor off the ground. Sorry.
Yeah. He was James Bond when in reality he was Roger Moore.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. You nailed it. I would have possible answer: Sean Connery, Timothy Dalton, Daniel Craig.
I also would have accepted Peter Sellers.
Peter Sellers is also. What's the one that Lansley? What's the one that was in one James Bond movie?
Angela Lansbury.
Angela Lansbury. Yeah. Murder, She Wrote. And she does the barrel shoot.
Murder, I'm licensed to.
She's also Yoda. But Fairbanks and Pickford both knew that in 1918 that a divorce and affair were scandalous, even enough to ruin a career, and they were hesitant.
Back to Eddie Mannix.
Back to Eddie Mannix, and they were really scared to go for it. They wanted to get divorces from their they wanted it from their spouses.
Forgot to mention they were married to their siblings.
Oh, did I not mention that? But in 1920, they went for it. They divorced their spouses and got married on March 28th, 1920 with a small crowd of loved ones. The audiences didn't turn on them because both stars had such a devoted fan base that they were excited.
So they were willing to, they knew they were just like, it was like the Avengers to them, but real life.
It was like when you're in high school and the really hot girl and the hot guy who you're like, that guy's really friendly. He's like not mean to me. Like they hook up and you're like, good for them. They make a good,
good for them. No one will ever date me. But this was like Captain America.
My hand is stuck in my locker. Yeah, this was Captain America.
He's marrying Thor.
Not even the characters. This is Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth getting married legally.
Finally.
All they've wanted. They had such big fan bases that all the fans were so excited that, my favorite 2 movie stars are getting together. They had such big fans that they got mobbed everywhere they went, on their honeymoon, on the streets. Fans were going crazy to see these two in the real world. It was the first time that a movie couple was getting the full 21st century celebrity treatment of like, I sat down at a cafe just to have a biscuit and I have 150 people. These two were now Hollywood royalty. During the 20s, Mary was now bordering on her 30s and felt like it was inappropriate to keep being cast as a child. Like you brought up, in 1920, she played Pollyanna when she was 28. And Mary Pickford...
Who's Pollyanna? Like you're saying that like I should... I know the movie, but like is it supposed to be a young lady?
Yeah, it's a young girl.
Okay.
It's a young girl who is cute in a small southern town that she moves in with her aunt, and then she falls off a tree and has no legs. That's later.
That's what Pollyanna's about?
I mean, the one with Haley Mills is about that. Mary Pickford was also the first movie star to get typecast and couldn't seem to get her audience to make the jump with her to more adult roles. They wanted her to continue playing the innocent types, and they kind of like would not let her stray from that. In some of her roles, she was able to channel her inner pain and experiences for roles of an abused child, and it really resonated with people. And even still, people, like even now, when people talk about those movies of the silent era, they talk about her acting. Like her acting was so good in those roles where she had to play an abused child that people in 2022 are like, look at that. That was the thing about it, was that she was a 28-year-old playing a child around actual children who were the same height as her. And she's the most successful
woman. She was
woman.
really short?
She was pretty short, yeah. Like she had like an ageless face. For like a really long time in her life, she just had a face of a little girl. So she would, like the most successful woman in show business, wants to change and isn't really able to. 2 more significant things happen at the end of the 20s that further solidify Mary Pickford's name in Hollywood history. Her and Douglas Fairbanks become the first official movie stars to have their hand and footprints placed in the cement at Grauman's Chinese Theater in April of 1927.
It wasn't R2-D2? It wasn't R2-D2 and C-3PO, the biggest Hollywood couple I can think of?
According to legend / rumor, the actual first person was Norma Talmadge when she accidentally walked into the theater through wet cement, which is apparently, I don't know if this is true.
On hands and feet.
I dropped my keys.
As her contacts fell out. This gives me an idea.
Now we got to do it with all the actors to make it look like that's not a mistake, because I will not repay for that. I'm not
Cement is
repaving that.
expensive.
Yeah, because of that, like the joke or tradition, it comes from her walking through wet cement. So the two
the first time it wasn't a joke
was with Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks. Mary and Douglas were also 2 of the 36 founding members of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts, created in 1927. Mary and Doug also went to work on creating a lecture series on filmmaking at USC and created the first film course on history of film, hoping that it would set the groundwork to elevate filmmaking to the status of other fine arts, which it did. Also, real quick, I want to say 1929 at Grand Central Air Terminal, which we covered, she christened a TWA aircraft the City of Los Angeles prior to the first coast-to-coast flight. The plane was called the City of Los Angeles. She christened it. That plane, the City of Los Angeles,
went on to be the first
coast-to-coast flight, which took off from Glendale, which is now where the Imagineering building
Where
is.
did it fly when she christened it? Was that the coast-to-coast flight, or just...
That was it. That was the coast-to-coast flight, but
so
it was probably...
smashed it and it went on its way?
Yeah, that you like spanking a horse.
Giddy up.
Giddy up. I'm going to hit you with a champagne bottle.
Airplanes hate that.
So by the end of the 1920s, Mary...
Pilots like sitting on top whipping the plane.
Whoa, boy, whoa. By the end of the 20s, Mary Pickford was at the top of her game, and then the oh-no's happened. In 1928, oh no, her mom and business manager, Charlotte, passed away, and they were obviously really close.
So it wasn't like a bad relationship between them?
No, I think they disagreed sometimes, but it seemed like a functioning relationship.
You should never disagree with your mother.
I learned
Shame
that.
on you, Mary.
Shame on you, Norman.
Let's just say it. A boy's best friend is his mother. You shouldn't really go against her. I mean, you don't do that to your best friend.
She's a little nutty, sure, but she doesn't belong in a nut house. Also, don't check on her, please. God, don't check on her. I'm begging you to not check on her. I gotta sink your car if you check on her.
If you need anything from the cellar, I will get it.
I will get it for you. Don't worry. It's kind of a 2-person job. I'll handle it. I'm 2 people. Mary was obviously, after her mom died, she was wrought with grief, and she shocked fans worldwide by cutting off her golden curls that she was famous for.
By the way, that's how I felt when I walked into work after I got a haircut.
I wanted
like people fainting.
Yeah. Oh no, what happened to our little baby, our little long-haired shaggy baby?
America's sweetheart.
America's sweetheart. Cut his hair. You cut your hair. Audiences were not happy about her shedding a defining physical characteristic. Mary Pickford was the first movie star to make her fans angry by having having a real life and not just being an unchanging doll on the shelf.
Isn't that what happened in like Arliss or something, where like the character was known for having curly hair? Felicity
had Carrie Russell had long curly hair, and people were like, "This is my favorite part of the show," and she cut it. And they immediately canceled it, which sucks because Carrie Russell's great. Her and Kieran Culkin should be in a feature together.
America's 2 sweethearts.
When Charlotte died, she gave a large portion of her money to Mary and a considerable amount to the other kids, Lottie and Jack. Her reasoning for that was like the family rode on the back of Mary's successes. She carried them all, and she worked so hard to ensure they all had a good life. I would like to formally retire the phrase "the man of the house" and instead use "the Mary Pickford of the house." When her dad died, Gladys Smith became the Mary Pickford of the house and helped the entire family out at 8 years old. Started doing that. There's that blow. And then the talkies hit, which was the Great Depression of the silent film era. It ended many careers of successful silent film stars. When synchronized film first came into motion pictures, it was treated like a gimmick, like
3D.
Exactly, like Mary Pickford.
Like 3D has proven itself to be.
Have you seen Creature of the Black Lagoon in 3D? I think you're not understanding.
I don't think you've seen Avatar lately.
Or Jackass 3D. Even Mary said it's like putting lip rouge on the Venus de Milo. And just like motion pictures had been seen as a novelty, it was not. Hold on, can you backtrack a little bit? Can she draw that?
What color?
It said that Mary Pickford was the first movie star to attempt a role in the talkie, like a big star. Her first talkie was in 1929's Coquette, in which she got to act her age, usually put down, but this time it was a career goal. Audiences, again, not happy about her playing an adult. They were upset that she was playing a flapper with a bob instead of her golden curls, and now she is talking. A lot of articles say that her talking career was a disaster, but Homegirl won an Oscar for it in 1930.
Really?
She was the second woman to ever win Best Actress at the Academy Awards.
What movie was this?
Coquette?
again, like I do not know what these movies are.
I probably watched 10 minutes of this just to hear her voice. But it's one of the first talkies, so it's primitive and captured a lot of background noise. Pickford didn't really like performing in a talkie because you have to remember
the director still talk like bigger,
faster. Yeah, she had to remember her lines, lots of background noise.
It's like when we were doing to compare ourselves to Mary Pickford. It was like when we were doing the video stuff, and we're like,
edit it.
Yeah, we have to do this in one take.
Just edit it. And you're like, no, you have to remember to light and say it at the camera. I'm like, but you can edit it, right?
That's why there's so many parts of that video where your head is just like twitching from side to side.
And then another thing that I had, it was a completely different experience as an actress being in a talkie. Her voice was high pitched, which only added to her childlike presence, and she wanted to escape from that. So in 1929, Mary and Doug
sounds like Mickey Mouse.
Kind of.
I'm here to Pollyanna. I want to dance for everybody right now. I'm a flapper after all. Please, my grandchildren are going to watch this.
In 1929, Mary and Doug worked together in the Taming of the Shrew, their first and last co-starring film. The 30s were real hard on our girl. In 1933, her brother Jack dies from complications of being a raging alcoholic.
God, like every man in her life.
Yeah. Douglas Fairbanks was overseas for months at a time and was reported to be having an affair. Again, she tried to make it work, but it was failing. This caused Mary to start an incredibly dangerous habit. She was drinking to self-medicate, which she kind of never had done before. Luella Parsons printed on the front pages that they were separating, and the two announced their divorce in 1933, which still took 3 years to officiate. He ends up marrying British socialite Lady Sylvia Ashley. Who cares about that bum? But Mary Pickford ends up marrying a co-star that she had like an electric on-screen presence with, Charles Buddy Rogers, which is weird because Buddy Holly's first name is also Charles. So is Charles Buddy a thing? They married in 1936, the same year that her sister dies of a heart attack. Again, Mary was absolutely crushed, but this one stung in particular hard because now she's the last member of her family, like her family that she grew up with. Mm-hmm. At this point, with the monumental career this woman has had, she decides to retire after her final film, Secrets, in 1933. But she was far from being a lazy housewife. She started a cosmetic company. She founded an hourly program for movie stars who had no one to take care of them.
That's the Motion Picture Fund,
that's
which
right.
it's now in Calabasas.
Yeah,
that's a great place.
It is. And it's a great program. And an incredible thing for her to have done. She starts writing pamphlets on Christian science.
A ton of people died there during COVID. Go on.
Not her fault.
Prove it.
But they saw a woman in white walking around.
Coughing. And she had a high-pitched voice and a bob.
Looked like a little girl, but it also looked like a 29-year-old. She wrote pamphlets on Christian science, which is not a good thing. It's just a fact. She kept producing films and working in radio. She was still a vice president at this time of United Artists until the mid-30s and was truly the only founder working for the company at a certain point.
Right. Charlie Chaplin was doing his own thing.
Yeah.
And the rest were dead.
That or their careers were dead. She wrote her autobiography, Sunshine and Shadow, in the mid-50s. Buddy Rogers and her also adopted 2 children, but Pickford was kind of like, at this point, was something of like a narcissistic Hollywood mom. It wasn't a good relationship she had with her adopted kids. They offered her the role of Norma Desmond in Sunset Boulevard, and a lot of people say that she would have been perfect for that role. After the 50s, she becomes, like you said, like a secluded alcoholic, forgotten by the film industry, washed away by new stars who traded innocence for sex appeal. She was said that she wanted to take a torch to her collection of all her films she'd ever been in, which, she had the copies of, like, she had some of the last copies of these movies.
I don't see how she could play Norma Desmond.
What's Norma Desmond about that? But either she was talked out of it or the statement didn't get her the attention she wanted, so that never happened.
She's standing there with a torch and nobody
Anybody?
cares.
In 1975, the Academy gave Mary Pickford an Honorary Academy Award for her contribution to cinema. She was too weak to appear at the Academy, so they visited her at Pickford to film it, her accepting it. And just like her fans of the 20s, the 70s audience was surprised to see her grown up.
It's so bizarre. Yeah. Like when you see, like, it's crazy enough that this lady who literally feels like she existed 1,000 years ago, and there's a video of her from the 70s.
Yeah, it blows me away that she was alive to watch Star Wars.
Well, she was there when they were reshooting the cantina scenes.
I gotta see the rest of this. The whole movie's about the band, right?
Make him shoot first.
I'm Mary Pickford, I demand it. Her presence as an older woman really upset people. It was really unsettling. She was wearing like a satin robe with a fur collar and draped in jewels, which sounds like she had on like...
Again, how could she be Norma Desmond?
She had on a wig of blonde curls and false eyelashes and lipstick, and it was a huge gap from how those who remembered her thought about her, which sucks.
Oh, really? She's not the 15-year-old girl from 1912 anymore?
It makes me so angry because, like, this is what a woman in her 80s who's rich, she got stalled up. Like, this is what she looks like. Why are people like, oh, girl, like, let her be...
As if the young people in the 70s looked good.
Oh,
they looked like they were 90.
Dennis Hopper?
The youngest man in
Walks
Hollywood.
in every room like he's Charles Manson, and he's gonna be like, "Oh God, she has on the 80-year-old woman has lipstick on." Yeah, it's really upsetting. And I think that I remember hearing maybe that she had she had a stroke before that, so like functionality of her body wasn't like at its peak. So like she just seemed like an old woman, which she was an old woman. She was born almost 100 years before this was filmed. Mike Royko of the LA Times wrote, "Mary Pickford, the one-time screen darling of America, has managed to offend people. She did it by growing old." I don't know if that's a condemnation of the crowd's reaction or Mary Pickford, but that was a response to one of those.
It depends if it's written by Medium or if it's written by the director.
Also, during her career highlight reel they showcased her cutesy roles associated with her movie stardom, but not her business savvy. None of her contributions to the film industry or her as a pioneer of the media. In January of 1979, Mary placed her substantial collection of photographs, documents, and other memorabilia. She gave that to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Library to establish the Mary Pickford collection that students and scholars could use for research. She died of a stroke May of that year in Santa Monica.
What year was this? 79? Okay.
Yeah.
So she didn't get to see the Empire Strikes Back.
No. She left on a good note.
The galaxy was saved and she could die in peace.
We started to talk about Mary Pickford's contributions to LA, and it ended up talking about her life and career. And that's fitting because she was the first movie star in Movie Star Town and helped build the industry that is pretty much the backbone of the city that we're living in. Yeah. And she also enjoyed chili dogs.
One time.
And one time.
At least one time.
We accuse her of being like a hound for it. But that's Mary Pickford's life. That's Mayor Pickford's life.
She really did. The more we look at what she had her finger on, like Beverly Hills, the modern way that the movie industry works.
The modern way that you function as a celebrity, too. She
as a celebrity, how a woman can do business in a man's industry.
Absolutely. And it's, her name came up in our podcast and still, every once in a while will come up. As I was noticing, I would, follow hyperlinks and get to something that she was associated with. And like every time they would list celebrities, they always picked her first. It'd always be like Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, blah, blah, blah.
Because Pick is in the name.
Pick me.
She's beloved. Like she's still like Douglas Fairbanks, you look back on and still like, wow, Douglas Fairbanks is a movie star. But it also comes with like crazy drunk, lecher, like just kind of gross.
Yeah.
But like Mary Pickford kind of like she came out clean. Like we're talking about the big four of this, like which one of those except Mary Pickford is still not problematic today?
Absolutely.
I can tell you, only Charlie Chaplin.
And the wonderful choices he makes. You read everything through her entire life, like, the hardest working person in any room was always Mary Pickford.
Right. And she had to be.
And